They found Duke Adrian Blackthorne kneeling in the mud outside his own estate at dawn, begging his wife not to take their daughter away. The most powerful man in England, reduced to this. His hands trembled against the carriage door while servants turned their eyes away from the humiliation. Inside, 8-year-old Amelia pressed her face against the glass, watching her father grovel for a woman he had already destroyed. Lady Evelyn didn't look back. The horses lurched forward, and Adrian collapsed into the dirt, surrounded by the empire he had traded his family to keep. How does a man lose everything while still standing in his own castle? Stay with me. This is the story of a fall no one saw coming, and the lie that made it all possible. The evening Adrian Blackthorne first touched Clara Whitmore's hand, London was drowning in rain. He remembered that detail with disturbing clarity even years later, the way water hammered against the tall windows of Blackthorne Manor, how the candlelight caught the nervous flutter of her fingers as she poured his brandy. She was 19, maybe 20, young enough that her presence in his private study after midnight should have set off every alarm his aristocratic training had built into him. It didn't. Adrian sat in his leather chair and watched her move through the room with a strange mixture of clumsiness and deliberate grace. She had been working in the manor for 3 months. He knew her name only because the housekeeper had mentioned hiring a new girl from Cornwall. Pretty thing, good worker, keeps to herself. That last part was a lie. Clara had started lingering near doorways when Adrian passed, asking if he needed anything with eyes that held his gaze a fraction too long. Wearing her uniform a little differently than the others, tighter at the waist, looser at the collar. Small adjustments that a duke wasn't supposed to notice about a maid, but Adrian noticed everything. He was 42 years old, master of estates across 3 counties, and he had spent 20 years perfecting the appearance of a flawless marriage. Lady Evelyn moved through society like a porcelain figure, elegant, untouchable, admired. Their daughter Amelia had just turned 6. From the outside, the Blackthorne family represented everything England's aristocracy was supposed to be. From the inside, Adrian felt like he was suffocating. Evelyn had grown cold after Amelia's difficult birth. Not hostile, just distant. She performed her duties with mechanical precision, hosting dinners, managing the household, appearing at his side for every public engagement. But the warmth had drained out of their private moments years ago. Their bedroom had become a mausoleum of polite distance. Adrian told himself he was fine with it, that this was normal, that all marriages settled into this kind of professional partnership eventually. Then Clara brought him brandy at midnight, and something in Adrian's chest cracked open. "You need anything else, Your Grace?" Her voice was soft. Not the practiced deference of an experienced servant, but something more hesitant, more real. Adrian looked up from the contracts he was pretending to read. "No, thank you." She should have left. She didn't. Instead, she moved to the fireplace and began adjusting the logs with a brass poker, even though the fire was already burning perfectly. Adrian watched the curve of her back, the way her dark hair had come slightly loose from its pins. "Must be lonely," she said quietly. "Working so late while everyone else sleeps." Adrian's hand tightened on his glass. "I prefer the quiet. Do you?" She turned to face him, and the directness in her eyes was something Adrian hadn't experienced in his own home for years. Evelyn had mastered the art of looking through him. Clara looked at him like he was actually there. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move toward the door. Adrian stood. He didn't remember making the decision to stand. It just happened. Like his body was operating on instincts his mind knew better than to trust. "What's your full name?" "Clara Whitmore, Your Grace." "How old are you, Clara Whitmore?" 21 next month. She was lying. Adrian could tell. But he didn't care. The rain kept hammering, and the house was so quiet, and Clara was looking at him like he was more than just a title, more than just a function. "You should go," Adrian said. "Should I?" "Yes." She walked toward the door. Adrian felt the moment dissolving. Then she stopped with her hand on the brass handle and looked back over her shoulder. "Will you be working late tomorrow night too, Your Grace?" Adrian swallowed. Every instinct he had spent his entire life cultivating told him to say no, to dismiss her, to maintain the boundaries that separated a duke from his household staff. "Probably," he heard himself say. Clara smiled. It wasn't the seductive smile he might have expected. It was something sadder, more knowing. Then I'll make sure there's fresh brandy waiting. She left. Adrian stood in the study for another hour staring at the fire, feeling like he had just made a decision without actually deciding anything. The affair began 3 nights later. Adrian would spend the rest of his life trying to remember how it happened, who touched who first, what words were said, whether there was any moment where he could have stopped it. But the truth was simpler and more pathetic than that. Clara had walked into his study with brandy. Adrian had looked at her, and all the loneliness he had been performing strength to hide came pouring out. They didn't speak much that first time. Afterward, lying on the floor in front of the dying fire, Clara had rested her head on his chest and said the only thing that mattered. "You look like you needed someone to see you." Adrian had no answer for that, because she was right. For 3 months, the affair stayed contained to those late-night meetings in the study. Adrian justified it in 100 different ways. Evelyn didn't want him anymore. He deserved some happiness. This wasn't hurting anyone as long as it stayed secret. He was careful. Always careful. Then Clara came to him one morning before dawn, found him in the stables where he went to think, and said 5 words that detonated his entire life. "Adrian, I'm carrying your child." He didn't doubt her. Not for a second. That was the first mistake. "Are you certain?" Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. She looked terrified, vulnerable, nothing like the composed young woman who had seduced him in his study. "I didn't know how to tell you. I know what this means for you, for your family. I can leave. I can disappear. You'll never have to see me again." Adrian's mind was racing. A bastard child, scandal. Evelyn would never forgive this. Amelia would grow up knowing her father had betrayed her mother. Everything he had built would collapse. But underneath the panic was something else, something Adrian didn't want to examine too closely. Relief, because the child made it real, made it matter, transformed the affair from a shameful secret into something with weight and consequence, something that couldn't be ignored or dismissed or buried. "You're not leaving," Adrian heard himself say. Clara looked up, confused. "What?" "You're not leaving. I'll take care of this. Of you. Of the child." "Adrian, you can't. Your wife." "I'll handle Evelyn." He had no idea how, but standing in that stable with Clara's tear-stained face looking up at him like he was her only hope, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in years. Needed. The conversation with Evelyn happened 2 days later. Adrian had rehearsed it a dozen times, trying to find some version where he didn't come across as a complete monster. There wasn't one, so he just told her the truth in the drawing room while she was arranging flowers. "I've been unfaithful. One of the servants. She's pregnant." Evelyn's hands stopped moving. The silence stretched so long, Adrian thought she might not respond at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was perfectly level. "I see." That was it. No screaming, no tears. Just those 2 words delivered with the same tone she might use to acknowledge a weather report. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I never meant—" She held up one hand, cutting him off. "Don't. Please don't insult me with apologies you don't mean." Adrian felt anger flare, which was easier than shame. "How long have you cared about what I feel, Evelyn? How long have we been strangers in this house?" She turned to face him fully then, and for the first time Adrian saw past the porcelain mask to the exhaustion underneath. "You want to know when I stopped trying to reach you, Adrian? When Amelia was born. When you looked at our daughter, and I saw disappointment in your eyes because she wasn't a son. When you barely touched me for 3 years except when you needed an heir. When you turned every moment of intimacy into a transaction. That's not fair, isn't it?" Adrian had no answer, because buried underneath his indignation was the terrible knowledge that she was right. Evelyn turned back to her flowers. "What do you want me to do, Adrian? Rage and weep and beg you to send her away? Would that make you feel better about yourself? I want you to understand. I understand perfectly. You felt neglected, so you found comfort with someone younger and more grateful. It's the oldest story in our world. What I don't understand is why you're telling me now, because she's keeping the child, and I intend to support them both." The pruning shears in Evelyn's hand slipped, for just a moment, then she set them down very carefully on the table. "Support them how?" Adrian took a breath. They'll stay here, in the manor. The child will be acknowledged and provided for. Now Evelyn did look at him, really looked at him. You're asking me to live under the same roof as your mistress and bastard child. I'm telling you how this is going to be. Something changed in Evelyn's face then. Some final light going out. Very well. I won't fight you, Adrian. I stopped fighting you years ago. But understand this. You're making a choice right now. And there's no version of this future where Amelia doesn't know what her father values more than her mother. Amelia will be fine. She's young. She won't understand. Evelyn smiled, and it was the saddest thing Adrian had ever seen. That's what frightens me most. That you actually believe that. Clara moved into a suite of rooms in the East Wing 3 weeks later. The scandal rippled through the household staff first, then leaked into society like poison into groundwater. Adrian told himself he didn't care what people thought. He had the power to weather any gossip. The Blackthorn name had survived worse, but Evelyn's prediction proved accurate. Amelia didn't understand the specifics, but she understood the atmosphere. She started having nightmares, clinging to her mother, asking why father didn't read to her anymore before bed. Because Adrian had stopped, not consciously. But his attention had shifted toward Clara and the coming child, toward the future he was building with someone who still looked at him like he mattered. The boy was born 7 months later. Oliver. Clara named him Oliver. Adrian held his son because that's what he believed Oliver was, and felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut since Amelia's birth. A son. Finally. The heir he had always needed. He didn't notice Evelyn watching from the doorway with Amelia's small hand gripped tight in hers. Didn't see the way his daughter's face crumpled when he refused to look up. Didn't register the moment Evelyn led Amelia away and whispered something into her ear that made the 6-year-old girl stop crying and go very, very quiet. Adrian was too busy staring at Oliver's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, planning all the ways he would secure this boy's future. The next 3 years were a masterclass in managed destruction. Adrian convinced himself he was balancing everything, maintaining his marriage while building a relationship with his son, treating both children equally. But the staff knew better, visitors knew better, and Amelia, now 9 years old and developing the sharp perception children acquire when they have to, knew better than anyone. She watched her father spend hours with Oliver, teaching him to ride, reading him stories, lighting up in ways he never had with her. She watched her mother transform from cool distance into something harder and more brittle. Watched Evelyn perform the role of Duchess while slowly dying inside. And she watched Clara move through the manor like she owned it, which, in every way that mattered, she did. The dinner party was where it all finally shattered. Adrian was hosting a gathering of influential lords and their wives, showing off Blackthorn Manor's grandeur, proving that scandal hadn't touched him. Evelyn played her part perfectly. Gracious hostess, elegant conversationalist, the perfect duchess. Then Lord Pemberton's wife made an observation that seemed innocent but landed like a blade. Your son is growing so quickly, Duke Blackthorn. He must be, what, nearly 4 now? Adrian smiled. 3.5, yes. Sharp as a whip already. Lady Pemberton tilted her head. 3.5? But I could have sworn. She caught herself. But the damage was done. Several of the other guests had gone quiet, doing mental arithmetic that Adrian had never bothered to do. Because if Oliver was 3.5, and Clara had claimed she was 2 months pregnant when she told Adrian, that meant she had already been 3 to 4 months along when the affair started. Which meant the timing didn't work. Which meant there was another possibility no one wanted to say out loud at a dinner table. Evelyn set down her wine glass with perfect precision and smiled at Lady Pemberton. Children do grow so quickly. Amelia is already 9, practically a young woman, though I'm sure many people forget I even have a daughter, given how rarely she's mentioned in polite conversation. The ice in her voice could have frozen the Thames. Adrian felt the room shift, felt the judgment settle like fog. But his pride wouldn't let him acknowledge the math problem everyone had just silently calculated. After the guests left, he found Evelyn in their bedroom packing a small trunk. What are you doing? Leaving, finally. You can't be serious. She didn't look up from folding Amelia's dresses. I've endured 3 years of humiliation, Adrian. 3 years of watching you abandon our daughter for a woman who played you like a fiddle. But I won't stay and watch Amelia learn that loving you means accepting cruelty. One dinner party and suddenly you're fleeing? Evelyn stopped, turned, and for the first time in years, Adrian saw real fury in her face. One dinner party? You've spent 3 years parading your bastard through our home while Amelia begs for scraps of your attention. You've let that woman sit at our table, sleep in rooms my grandmother furnished. You've rewritten our daughter out of her own inheritance because you're so desperate to believe Clara's lies that you've blinded yourself to basic mathematics. What the hell are you talking about? Evelyn laughed. It was a terrible sound. Oliver is 4 months older than Clara claimed, which means she was already pregnant before your affair started. Which means, and I want you to hear this clearly, Adrian, that boy is not your son. Adrian felt the floor tilt. You're lying. Am I? Then explain the money transfers. The letters from London. Clara thought she destroyed, but the housekeeper found. The man who visited her twice before you ever touched her. You've been spying on her? I've been trying to protect what's left of this family. But you've made your choice, Adrian. You chose pride over truth, status over love, a fantasy over your own daughter. Evelyn picked up the trunk. So I'm making mine. Amelia and I are leaving, and we're not coming back until you're ready to see what you've actually done. Adrian should have stopped her, should have demanded proof, should have done 100 things differently. Instead, he said the one thing that guaranteed she would leave. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to beg you to return. Evelyn looked at him with something close to pity. I stopped expecting anything from you years ago, Adrian. That's why this doesn't hurt as much as you think it should. She left. Adrian stood in the bedroom alone, listening to the carriage being prepared in the courtyard below, listening to Amelia's small voice asking her mother where they were going, listening to his entire life cracking apart. He could have run after them, could have demanded Evelyn stay and explain her accusations, could have investigated Clara's past like he should have done years earlier. Instead, he walked to the east wing and found Clara reading to Oliver by the fireplace. She looked up and smiled. Is everything all right, my love? Adrian stared at her, at the boy, at the future he had traded everything to build. Evelyn left. Clara's eyes widened with perfectly performed surprise. Oh no. Adrian, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Don't. He said it more harshly than he intended. Clara went quiet. Adrian sat down across from them and watched Oliver play with wooden blocks. Watched the boy who was supposed to be his heir, his second chance, his redemption. And for the first time in 3 years, a whisper of doubt crept into Adrian's mind. But pride is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs doubt before it can grow into real questions. So Adrian pushed the whisper down, locked it away, and spent the rest of the night convincing himself that Evelyn was just bitter, just jealous, just unable to accept that he had found happiness somewhere else. Outside, the rain started again. And somewhere in a carriage rolling toward London, Amelia pressed her face against the glass and watched Blackthorn Manor disappear into the darkness. She didn't cry. She had learned from her mother that crying didn't change anything. Instead, she made herself a promise that 9-year-old children shouldn't have to make. When I grow up, I'll never need him. I'll never need anyone. Behind them, the manor's lights blazed against the storm. Inside, Duke Adrian Blackthorn sat alone in his study with a glass of brandy, convinced he had made the right choice. The lie he was living had already destroyed his family. He just didn't know it yet. 3 months later, Adrian stood in the empty nursery that used to belong to Amelia and realized he couldn't remember the last time he had read her a bedtime story. The staff had packed away her things with efficient speed after Evelyn left. The room looked like it had never been occupied, like his daughter had never existed. Oliver's laughter echoed from somewhere downstairs. Clara was teaching him a song. Adrian closed the nursery door and walked away. But that night, alone in the massive bed he used to share with Evelyn, the doubt came back stronger. He found himself calculating timelines, remembering details that hadn't seemed important before. The way Clara had appeared at the manor, already knowing exactly which rooms were his. How she had maneuvered herself into his study with the precision of someone following a plan. The letters Evelyn mentioned. Adrian got up at 2 a.m. and searched Clara's rooms while she slept with Oliver down the hall. He told himself he was just confirming his wife's paranoid accusations, that he would find nothing and could finally put this suspicion to rest. He found the letters hidden inside a hatbox, 6 of them, all from a man named Thomas Garrett in London, all dated before Clara had arrived at Blackthorn Manor. Adrian read them by candlelight in the hallway outside her room and felt his entire world collapse one paragraph at a time. The Duke is exactly as you described, lonely, desperate for validation. This will work. Remember, play innocent. Make him believe he seduced you, not the other way around. Once you're pregnant, wait 2 months before telling him. He'll assume it's his. Men like Blackthorn never question their own virility. Our son will have the future we could never give him. Just stick to the plan. Adrian read the last letter 3 times, trying to make the words mean something different than what they obviously said. They didn't. Clara hadn't been a naive young maid seduced by a powerful man. She had been a woman with a plan and a partner. She had gotten pregnant by Thomas Garrett, targeted Adrian specifically, and executed a con so perfect that Adrian had destroyed his own marriage defending it. Oliver wasn't his son, had never been his son. And Adrian had sacrificed everything, his wife, his daughter, his reputation, his honor, protecting a lie. He stood in the hallway holding those letters while the candle burned down, and for the first time in his adult life, Duke Adrian Blackthorn had absolutely no idea what to do next. Because confronting Clara meant admitting he had been played, but staying silent meant continuing to live the lie. And finding Evelyn meant confessing that she had been right about everything while he had been too proud and too blind to see it. Adrian walked back to his empty bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the letters. Outside, dawn was breaking over Blackthorn Manor. Inside, a man who had once commanded respect across 3 counties was learning what it felt like to have nothing left but the truth he had spent 3 years running from. The question was whether he had the courage to finally face it, or whether his pride would bury him completely before he got the chance. Adrian burned the letters at dawn. He stood in the fireplace of his study and fed them one by one into the flames, watching Thomas Garrett's handwriting curl and blacken, watching the evidence of his own stupidity turn to ash. When the last scrap dissolved into smoke, Adrian poured himself brandy even though the sun wasn't up yet. His hands shook, not from the alcohol, from the choice he had already made before the fire had even finished consuming the truth. He was going to bury it. The realization had come to him sometime around 4 in the morning, sitting on his bedroom floor with those letters spread around him like accusations. Confronting Clara meant admitting he had been conned, admitting he had thrown away his marriage and his daughter for a lie so obvious that his own wife had spotted it while he stayed blind. The humiliation would be total, absolute. Every lord who had watched him parade Oliver around as his heir would know. Every servant who had witnessed him choose Clara over Evelyn would understand what kind of fool lived in Blackthorn Manor. Adrian Blackthorn, Duke, master of 3 estates, feared and respected across England, had been played by a 20-year-old maid and her lover. No, he couldn't face that. Wouldn't face that. So he made a different choice. The choice weak men make when the truth becomes too expensive to afford. He decided the lie was easier to live with than the shame. Adrian finished his brandy and walked upstairs to where Clara slept with Oliver in the east wing. He stood in the doorway watching them. This woman who had destroyed his family, this child who carried another man's blood, and felt something calcify in his chest. If he was going to commit to this lie, he had to commit completely. Had to make Oliver into the heir he claimed the boy was. Had to secure the future he had already paid for with everything that mattered. Evelyn was gone. Amelia was gone. There was no going back to what he had lost, so he would go forward into what he had chosen, even if it killed him. Clara woke up and saw him standing there. Adrian, is something wrong? He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the calculation behind the concern, saw the actress wearing the mask. But acknowledging that meant acknowledging everything. No, he said. Nothing's wrong. She smiled, relieved. Adrian walked away before the hatred in his gut could crawl up his throat. The obsession started that morning. Adrian threw himself into securing Oliver's future with the single-minded focus of a man trying to outrun his own conscience. He began meeting with solicitors about inheritance structures, rewriting provisions in his will, making sure that when he died, Oliver would inherit everything that mattered. The Blackthorn legacy would continue through this boy. It had to. Because if it didn't, then Adrian had destroyed his family for nothing. His steward, An old man named Jeffrey, who had served the family for 40 years, tried to raise concerns during one of these meetings. Your Grace, if I may, Lady Amelia is still your legitimate heir, rewriting the inheritance to favor a— Don't, Adrian cut him off. Don't say what you were about to say. Jeffrey went quiet, but his eyes held a sadness that made Adrian want to throw him out of the room. I'm simply advising caution, Your Grace. The legal complications of— I don't pay you to advise caution. I pay you to execute my instructions. Of course, Your Grace. But Jeffrey didn't move to write anything down. He just sat there with his old hands folded on the desk, looking at Adrian like he was watching someone drown. Is there something else you want to say, Jeffrey? The steward was quiet for a long moment. Then, I remember when Lady Amelia was born, Your Grace. You held her in the library and told me she was going to be smarter than all of us. You said any man who needed a son to feel proud was a fool. Adrian's jaw tightened. That was before. Before what, Your Grace? Before I understood what was required. Jeffrey nodded slowly, like he was filing that answer away in some mental ledger of Adrian's failures. Very well, Your Grace. I'll draft the necessary documents. He left. Adrian sat alone in the study and tried not to think about holding Amelia in the library, tried not to remember the weight of her in his arms, the way she had gripped his finger with her entire tiny hand. That version of himself felt like a stranger now. He poured another brandy, even though it was barely noon. The social invitations stopped coming around month 4, not all at once, just a slow, steady decline. Dinner parties Adrian used to be invited to happened without him. Hunting trips he would have been expected to join went forward with his name conspicuously absent from the guest lists. Lady Pemberton's observation at that final dinner party had done its work. The math didn't add up, and everyone knew it. They were too polite to say it directly, but the message was clear. Duke Blackthorne had been made a fool, and associating with him meant accepting the stench of his humiliation. Adrian told himself he didn't care, that he had never needed their approval anyway. But the isolation ate at him. He started drinking more, started snapping at servants over minor infractions, started spending longer hours alone in his study, going over financial documents and inheritance structures like they were scripture that could save him. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. She came to him one evening while he was reviewing Oliver's education plans, tutors to hire, schools to consider, connections to cultivate. Adrian had spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets mapping out the next 15 years of the boy's life. You're working too hard, Clara said softly, moving behind his chair to rub his shoulders. Adrian flinched at her touch, but didn't pull away. Oliver's future requires planning. He's 4 years old, Adrian. He has time. No, he doesn't. The sharpness in Adrian's voice made her hands still. Every day that passes is a day I'm not securing what he deserves, what he's owed. Clara came around to face him, confusion genuine for once. What he's owed? Adrian, what are you talking about? Adrian looked up at her and felt the lie sitting in his throat like poison. Because Oliver was owed nothing. Oliver was the product of a con. But admitting that meant admitting everything. So instead, Adrian said, he's my son, my heir. That comes with responsibilities I won't fail. Clara searched his face. Adrian wondered if she could see the truth burning behind his eyes. If she understood that he knew, that he had always known, somewhere deep down, but had chosen the comfortable lie over the hard reality. If she did see it, she was smart enough not to acknowledge it. She just kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're a good father, Adrian. Better than you give yourself credit for." The words hit him like a blade between the ribs, because the one person who should have heard those words, Amelia, was gone. And Adrian had no idea if she even remembered what his voice sounded like anymore. He pushed Clara away more roughly than he intended. "Leave me. I have work to finish." She left without argument. Clara had gotten very good at knowing when to push and when to retreat. Adrian sat alone and stared at his spreadsheets until the candles burned down to nothing. The letters from Evelyn started arriving 6 months after she left. Not letters asking to come back. Not letters begging for reconciliation. Legal letters. Formal correspondence from her solicitor outlining the terms of a separation. Evelyn wanted nothing from him except a modest allowance for Amelia's care and education. She wasn't asking for scandal or divorce. That would have damaged them both. She just wanted a clean financial separation and the legal right to live independently without Adrian's interference. The letters were cold, professional. They could have been written to a stranger. Adrian read them in his study and felt something close to grief, because buried in the legal language was a message Evelyn had written between the lines. I don't hate you anymore. I just don't think about you at all. That was somehow worse than hatred. He wrote back through his own solicitor, agreeing to her terms. He told himself it was the practical choice, that fighting would only draw out the pain. But the truth was simpler. He agreed because some part of him knew Evelyn was right to leave, knew that she had done what he should have done, chosen their daughter over his pride. The agreement was finalized within a month. Evelyn became financially independent. Amelia became a name Adrian only heard from his steward when discussing quarterly allowance payments. His daughter was 9 years old, and he had no idea what she looked like anymore. Oliver, meanwhile, was everywhere, running through the halls, demanding stories, climbing on Adrian's lap during breakfast and chattering about horses and knights and all the things 4-year-old boys obsess over. Adrian tried to love him, tried to feel the paternal warmth he was supposed to feel. Sometimes he almost managed it. Moments when Oliver would laugh at something silly, and Adrian would forget, just for a second, that this child represented the worst mistake of his life. But most of the time, looking at Oliver just reminded Adrian of what he had traded away to keep him. Clara watched these interactions with increasing concern. You're distant with him, she said one night after putting Oliver to bed. I'm tired. You're always tired lately, and you barely touch me anymore. Adrian poured himself another brandy. He was going through 2 bottles a day now. I have a lot on my mind, Clara. Then talk to me. Let me help. He laughed. It came out bitter and sharp. Help? You want to help? Clara's face shifted, just slightly, like she was recalculating. Adrian, what's going on? You've been different since Evelyn left. Colder, like you're angry at me for something I didn't do. Adrian stared at her over the rim of his glass and felt the truth pushing at his teeth. It would be so easy, so simple. Just open his mouth and let it all spill out. I found your letters, Clara. I know Oliver isn't mine. I know you played me from the beginning. I know I destroyed my family for a lie you and Thomas Garrett sold me. But saying it out loud meant the lie became real, meant he had to face what he'd done. So instead he said, I'm fine, just under pressure. Clara didn't believe him, but she had her own reasons for not pushing. They existed in that suspended tension. 2 people trapped in a lie, both knowing it was a lie, neither willing to break it open because the aftermath would destroy them both. The breaking point came on Amelia's 10th birthday. Adrian didn't know it was her birthday. He had lost track of the date, lost track of a lot of things. But his steward, old Jeffrey, who still carried the ledger of Adrian's failures, came into the study that morning with a reminder. Your Grace, I've prepared the quarterly allowance for Lady Amelia. It's her birthday today. Perhaps you'd like to include a personal note? Adrian looked up from his papers. His mind was blank. Her birthday? Yes, Your Grace. 10 years old today. 10. His daughter was 10. An entire year had passed since Evelyn left, and Adrian had not once thought to reach out, had not written, had not visited, had let Amelia grow up thinking her father had forgotten she existed. Because he had. I'll write something. Jeffrey set down paper and ink. Then he did something he had never done in 40 years of service. He spoke out of turn. May I be frank, Your Grace? Adrian's eyes narrowed. When have you ever needed permission, Jeffrey? The old man didn't smile. You're killing yourself over a boy who isn't yours. Everyone in this house knows it. The servants know it. The neighbors know it. Lady Evelyn knew it before she left. The only person still pretending is you. Adrian stood. The chair scraped back hard against the floor. Get out, Your Grace. I said, get out. Jeffrey looked at him with something close to pity. Then he bowed and left. Adrian stood alone in the study, staring at the blank paper where he was supposed to write a birthday message to a daughter he had abandoned. He picked up the pen, put it down, picked it up again, picked it up. What could he possibly say? Happy birthday, Amelia. Sorry I chose a lie over you. Sorry I let you grow up thinking you didn't matter. Sorry I'm too much of a coward to admit the truth. Adrian crumpled the paper and threw it into the fireplace. He didn't write, didn't send anything, just authorized the allowance payment and tried to pretend the hollow ache in his chest was indigestion. That night he got drunk enough to finally confront Clara. She was in the drawing room reading by candlelight. Oliver was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet except for the sound of Adrian's boots on marble as he walked in with a bottle of whiskey already half empty. Clara looked up, alarmed. "Adrian, are you all right?" "No." He sat down across from her and took another pull from the bottle. "Actually, I'm not all right, Clara. I haven't been all right since the day you walked into my study with your lies and your plans and your fucking con." Her face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Adrian leaned forward. The room tilted slightly, but he didn't care. "I found the letters. From Thomas. I know Oliver isn't mine. I know you targeted me. I know everything." Clara went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. Then she made her choice. "If you knew, why didn't you say anything?" The question hit Adrian like a fist, because he didn't have a good answer. Because the truth, that he was too proud to admit he'd been played, sounded pathetic even in his own head. "I don't know." Clara set down her book. When she spoke, her voice had changed. No more soft sweetness. No more playing the grateful young mother. Just cold calculation. "You want to know the truth, Adrian?" "Fine. Yes. Thomas and I planned it. Yes, Oliver is his son. Yes, I targeted you because you were lonely and arrogant and so desperate for someone to make you feel important that you couldn't see what was right in front of your face." Adrian felt like he'd been gutted. "Why? Why?" Clara laughed. "Because men like you have everything and people like me have nothing. Because I grew up in poverty watching aristocrats throw away more money on horses than my family saw in a year. Because I wanted my son to have a future and you were stupid enough to give it to him. So you destroyed my family." "You destroyed your own family," Clara shot back. "I just gave you an excuse to do what you already wanted. You were already tired of Evelyn, already disappointed in Amelia for not being a son. I just offered you a way out that let you pretend you were the victim instead of the villain." Adrian stood. The bottle fell and shattered on the floor. "Get out. Take Oliver and get the fuck out of my house." Clara stood too, and now there was real fear in her eyes. "Adrian, wait. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You're a liar and a con artist, and I want you gone." "And Oliver?" The question stopped Adrian cold. Because if he threw out Oliver, everyone would want to know why. The questions would start. The investigation. The truth would come out that Adrian had known for months and done nothing. That he had kept rewriting his inheritance to favor a child he knew wasn't his. The humiliation would be complete. Clara saw the calculation in his face and pressed the advantage. "You can't send us away, Adrian, because doing that means admitting you were wrong. Admitting you sacrificed Evelyn and Amelia for nothing. Your pride won't survive that." She was right, and they both knew it. Adrian sank back into his chair, defeated. "So what now? We just continue this?" Clara smoothed her dress. "Back in control. We continue this. Oliver grows up as your heir. I stay quiet. And you get to keep pretending you made the right choice. Everyone wins, except Evelyn, except Amelia." Clara's smile was cold. "They already lost, Adrian. The question is whether you're going to lose too, or whether you're going to protect what you have left." She walked out, leaving Adrian alone with broken glass and broken everything. He sat there until dawn, realizing the trap had finally closed completely. He couldn't expose Clara without exposing himself. Couldn't reclaim Amelia without admitting why he lost her. Couldn't go back and couldn't move forward. He was locked in a lie of his own making, and the only person holding the key was the woman who had put him there. The next 3 years were a slow descent into something darker. Adrian stopped fighting, stopped planning, just existed in the hollow routine of maintaining appearances while everything inside him rotted. He saw Oliver grow into a 7-year-old boy who looked nothing like him. Watched Clara move through the manor like she owned it, which, in every way that mattered, she did. Received quarterly reports about Amelia's education without ever reading past the first line. His daughter was 13 now, practically grown. He wouldn't recognize her if she walked past him on the street. The drinking got worse. The isolation got worse. The few friends Adrian had left stopped visiting when it became clear he was more interested in whiskey than conversation. And through it all, the lie kept growing, kept spreading, until it wasn't just a lie anymore. It was his entire life. The letter that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning. Adrian almost didn't open it. It was from some gambling club in London he'd never heard of. Probably a bill. Probably another reminder of money he owed or debts he'd forgotten. But something made him break the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in rushed handwriting. Your Grace. You don't know me, but I know Clara Whitmore. Or I should say, I know Thomas Garrett. We were at cards last night when he got drunk and started bragging about the con he and Clara pulled on some duke. Said he's been bleeding you for years while raising his son in your house. Thought you should know. Man has a big mouth when he's 3 bottles deep. Might want to ask him about it yourself. He's at the Rose and Thorn most nights. A friend Adrian read the letter 3 times. Then he called for his carriage. For the first time in 3 years, Duke Adrian Blackthorne had somewhere to be. And this time he wasn't running away from the truth. He was running straight at it. The Rose and Thorn smelled like stale tobacco and desperation. Adrian pushed through the door into a world he had never belonged to. Low ceilings, smoke-thick air, men hunched over cards and dice with the kind of focus poverty breeds. A few looked up when he entered. Most didn't care. Dukes meant nothing here except maybe someone to rob if they were stupid enough to flash coin. Adrian scanned the room and found him immediately. Thomas Garrett sat at a corner table with 3 other men, cards spread between them, and a bottle of something cheap making its rounds. He was younger than Adrian expected, maybe 30, handsome in a rough way that probably worked on women who didn't know better, women like Clara. Adrian walked straight to the table. The conversation died as the other men registered the quality of his coat, the cut of his boots. One of them started to stand, but Thomas waved him back down. Gentlemen, Thomas said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Looks like we have nobility gracing our establishment. To what do we owe the honor? Adrian ignored the others and stared directly at Thomas. We need to talk. Alone. Thomas leaned back in his chair, still grinning, but his eyes had gone sharp. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Your Grace, unless you're here to settle Clara's tab. She always did have expensive tastes. The other men laughed. Adrian felt rage climb his spine like fire. Now. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Then he shrugged and stood. Boys, keep my seat warm. This won't take long. He led Adrian out a back door into an alley that stank of piss and rotting food. The moment they were alone, Thomas turned and dropped the grin entirely. So, you finally figured it out. Adrian grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the brick wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. How long? How long have you been bleeding me? Thomas didn't fight back, just smiled like Adrian had told a joke. Since the beginning, you stupid bastard. Every month Clara sends me half of whatever you give her. Been doing it for 7 years now. Nice steady income, really. Better than working. Adrian's fist connected with Thomas's jaw before he realized he'd thrown the punch. Thomas's head snapped sideways and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. When he looked back at Adrian, he was laughing. There it is. There's the fire. Where was that when Clara was playing you like a fucking violin? Adrian hit him again. And again. Until Thomas slumped against the wall with blood streaming from his nose and Adrian's knuckles were raw. But Thomas kept laughing, kept looking at Adrian like he was the funniest thing in the world. You want to know the best part? Thomas spat blood onto the cobblestones. The best part is how easy it was. Clara walked into your house and you fell apart like wet paper. All she had to do was look sad and you gave her everything. Your money, your name, your family. He pushed himself upright, wiping blood from his face. You talk about me bleeding you? You bled yourself, Duke. We just collected what you were too pathetic to keep. Adrian felt something crack inside him. Some last restraint that had been holding the truth at bay. Oliver. Does he know? Thomas's grin widened. That I'm his real father? No. Clara thought it was better if he believed the lie. Easier to keep him in line. Though between you and me, he's starting to ask questions. Kid's got eyes. Knows he doesn't look anything like you. Adrian's voice came out hollow. What were you planning to do when he got older, when he inherited? Thomas shrugged. Cross that bridge when we get there. Maybe tell him the truth. Maybe not. Either way, he's set for life thanks to you. My son gets to be a duke and I didn't have to do a damn thing except knock up the right woman. The casualness of it, the complete absence of shame or remorse, was what finally broke Adrian. Because Thomas was right. Adrian had done this to himself, had chosen the lie over his family, had sacrificed everything real for something so obviously fake that a drunk gambler could see through it. "I could kill you," Adrian said quietly. Thomas nodded. "You could. Probably should, honestly. But then what? You'd hang for murder and Clara would still have your estate. Oliver would still inherit. And everyone would know you killed a man because you couldn't handle being made a fool." He stepped closer, close enough that Adrian could smell the whiskey on his breath. "The truth is, Duke, you're trapped. You committed to this lie so deep that there's no way out that doesn't destroy you. So you can hit me all you want, kill me if it makes you feel better. But it won't change the fact that you lost everything that mattered because you were too proud and too stupid to see what was right in front of you." Adrian stood in that filthy alley with blood on his hands and the ruins of his life laid bare, and realized Thomas was absolutely right. There was no way out, not without admitting everything, not without exposing himself as the pathetic fool he'd become. Thomas seemed to read his thoughts. "Go home, Duke. Go back to your manor and your fake son and your whore. Pretend everything's fine. It's what you're good at." He pushed past Adrian and disappeared back into the rose and thorn. Adrian stood alone in the alley for a long time, staring at his bloodied knuckles and trying to figure out how a man recovers from losing a fight he didn't know he was in until it was already over. The ride back to Blackthorn Manor took 3 hours. Adrian spent them rehearsing the confrontation in his head, what he would say to Clara, how he would throw her out, the satisfaction he would feel watching her scramble. But by the time the carriage pulled up to the estate, his rage had cooled into something colder and more dangerous. Because throwing out Clara meant exposing the lie, meant admitting to everyone, to society, to his remaining peers, to Evelyn, to Amelia, that he had been conned for 7 years. The humiliation would be total, complete. He would become a cautionary tale, the Duke who got played by his maid. Everything he had left, his name, his reputation, the scraps of respect people still gave him, would evaporate. So as Adrian walked through the front door of his home, he realized he was facing the same choice he'd faced 7 years ago when he first found those letters. He could expose the truth and destroy himself, or he could bury it deeper and destroy his soul. He found Clara in the drawing room reading to Oliver before bed. The boy looked up when Adrian entered, smiled that innocent smile children have before the world teaches them better. "Father, will you read with us?" Adrian looked at this 7-year-old child, Thomas Garrett's son, not his, and felt nothing. No warmth, no affection, just a hollow acknowledgement of the trap he'd built around himself. "Not tonight, Oliver. I need to speak with your mother." The boy's face fell. Clara's eyes sharpened. "Of course. Oliver, why don't you go get ready for bed? I'll come tuck you in shortly." Oliver left reluctantly. The moment the door closed, Clara stood. "Where were you?" "London." "And?" Adrian walked to the brandy cabinet, poured himself a glass with hands that had stopped shaking somewhere during the ride home. "I met Thomas." Clara went very still. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "I see." "Do you? Do you see, Clara? Because I'm trying to figure out what happens next, and I keep coming back to the same problem." "Which is?" Adrian turned to face her. "If I expose you, I expose myself. If I throw you out, everyone wants to know why. If I tell the truth, I become the fool who destroyed his family for a con so obvious my wife spotted it immediately." Clara relaxed slightly. She understood the trap as well as he did. "So what are you going to do, Adrian?" He took a long drink of brandy and tasted ash. "I don't know yet." Clara moved closer, cautious, testing. "You could let it go. Accept that what's done is done. Oliver is a good boy. He could still make you proud." "Stop." Adrian's voice was quiet, but it cut like glass. "Don't pretend this is about Oliver. This was never about Oliver. This was about you and Thomas seeing an opportunity and taking it. I'm just trying to figure out whether I destroy you or destroy myself." Clara's mask finally cracked. When she spoke, her voice had an edge Adrian had never heard before. "You want to destroy me, Adrian? Fine, but understand what that means. It means standing in front of every lord and lady in England and admitting you were too stupid to see through a 20-year-old maid. It means Evelyn gets to say I told you so for the rest of your life. It means Amelia learns her father chose a lie over her because he was too proud to admit a mistake." She stepped closer. Is that really what you want? To be remembered as the Duke who lost everything because he couldn't handle being wrong? Adrian stared at her and felt the trap close tighter, because she was right. Again. Exposing the lie meant accepting a humiliation so complete it would define him forever. So what do you suggest, Clara? We just continue this charade until I die? Clara's smile was cold. Or until you figure out how to forgive yourself for being human. Either way, the outcome's the same. Oliver stays. I stay. And you learn to live with choices you can't undo. Adrian wanted to hit her, wanted to scream, wanted to burn the entire manor down with all of them inside it. Instead, he just nodded. Get out of my sight. Clara left without another word. Adrian stood alone in the drawing room and finally understood the full weight of what he'd done. He had traded his family for a lie, traded love for pride, traded everything real for something fake. And the worst part, the part that made his hands shake and his breath come short, was that he still didn't know how to choose differently. Because choosing truth now meant accepting consequences he wasn't strong enough to face. So he did what weak men do when the walls close in. He poured another drink and pretended tomorrow would be different. The months that followed were a slow-motion collapse. Adrian stopped pretending he cared about Oliver, stopped performing the role of proud father. The boy noticed, started asking questions Clara deflected with increasing desperation. Why doesn't father like me anymore? He's just stressed, darling. He loves you very much. But Oliver was 7 now, old enough to recognize a lie when he heard one. The servants started talking, not openly, but Adrian could feel the shift. The way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. The looks exchanged when his back was turned. Everyone knew. They had always known. Adrian had just been the last one stupid enough to believe his own performance. The isolation became total. No visitors, no invitations. Just Adrian and Clara and Oliver trapped in Blackthorn Manor like prisoners in a cell of their own making. Adrian spent his days drinking and his nights staring at financial documents that detailed Oliver's future inheritance. Every page a reminder of the lie he was too weak to escape. Then the letter from Evelyn's solicitor arrived. Lady Amelia was turning 14. She would be presented to society soon. The solicitor was writing to inquire whether Duke Blackthorn intended to participate in his daughter's debut, or if Lady Evelyn should make arrangements independently. Adrian read the letter 3 times and realized he didn't know his own daughter well enough to have an opinion about her debut. 14 years old, practically a woman. And he had missed the last 4 years of her life completely. The grief hit him so hard he couldn't breathe, because Oliver's childhood, every moment Adrian had witnessed, belonged to someone else's son, Thomas Garrett's boy. But Amelia's childhood, the real one, the one with his actual blood, had passed while Adrian was busy playing father to a lie. He had lost both children, the fake one to resentment and the real one to neglect, and there was no way to get either back. Adrian wrote to Evelyn's solicitor that Lady Amelia should proceed with whatever arrangements her mother deemed appropriate, that he would provide any necessary funding but would not be attending. He signed the letter and felt like he was signing away the last piece of himself that still remembered what it meant to be a father. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later. Adrian was in his study, halfway through his first bottle of the day, when Geoffrey walked in without knocking. Your Grace, you have a visitor. I'm not receiving anyone. It's Lady Evelyn, Your Grace. The glass slipped from Adrian's hand and shattered on the floor. Evelyn was here. After 4 years of silence. After everything. Adrian's first instinct was to refuse. To send her away before she could see what he'd become. But Geoffrey was already retreating, and then Evelyn was walking through the door, and it was too late. She looked older, still beautiful, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. 4 years of raising a daughter alone while her husband played house with his mistress had carved something permanent into her features. Evelyn, Adrian managed. This is unexpected. She didn't sit, just stood in the doorway looking at him with the kind of clinical assessment doctors use on dying patients. You look terrible, Adrian. Thank you for the observation. I'm not here to trade pleasantries. I'm here because Amelia is about to enter society, and she deserves to know whether her father is going to humiliate her. Adrian flinched. Wouldn't you? Evelyn's voice was sharp. You've done nothing but humiliate her for 4 years. The question is whether you're planning to continue at her debut. I already told your solicitor I wouldn't attend. I know. I want to hear you say why. Adrian looked away, couldn't meet her eyes. Because I have no right to be there. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you know what Amelia asked me last week? She asked if you were dead. Because in her mind, that's the only explanation for why her father hasn't written or visited or acknowledged her existence in 4 years. The words hit like blows. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're alive. That you chose something else over her. That sometimes people we love become strangers. Adrian felt his throat close. Evelyn, She held up a hand. I didn't come here for apologies, Adrian. I came here to tell you that whatever you've built with that woman and her son, it's killing you. Anyone with eyes can see it. You're drowning in here, and you're too proud to grab the rope. What rope? There is no rope, Evelyn. There's just choices I can't undo and consequences I can't escape. Evelyn studied him with something that might have been pity. You know what the saddest part is? You still don't see it. You think the trap is the lie. But the real trap is your pride. The lie could end tomorrow if you were brave enough to face the humiliation. But you'd rather die in this house than admit you were wrong. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Amelia is debuting in 6 weeks. If you decide you want to be her father again, you know where to find us. But if you don't show up, Adrian, don't ever come looking for her. Because I won't let you break her heart twice. Evelyn left. Adrian sat in the wreckage of his study and finally understood the choice he actually faced. It wasn't between truth and lies. It was between pride and everything else that mattered. And for 4 years, pride had been winning. The question was whether he was strong enough to choose differently before there was nothing left to choose for. Adrian stood up, walked to the East Wing where Clara was teaching Oliver mathematics. They both looked up when he entered. Pack your things, Adrian said. Both of you. You're leaving today. Clara went pale. Adrian, wait. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. I'm done. I'm done living the lie. I'm done protecting you. I'm done sacrificing my daughter for your son. You can't just throw us out. Watch me. Adrian turned to Oliver, who was staring with wide, confused eyes. I'm sorry, Oliver. You deserve better than this. But you're not my son, and I can't keep pretending you are. The boy burst into tears. Clara gathered him close and stared at Adrian with pure hatred. You're making a mistake. No, Adrian said. I made the mistake 7 years ago. This is me finally fixing it. He walked out before his courage failed. Spent the next hour making arrangements, instructing his steward to provide Clara with enough money to settle elsewhere, writing letters to his solicitor about reversing Oliver's inheritance claims. Every action felt like amputating a limb, painful, necessary. By evening, Clara and Oliver were gone. Adrian stood in the empty manor and felt like he could breathe for the first time in years. But breathing wasn't the same as being whole. He walked to his desk and pulled out fresh paper, wrote 2 letters. The first to Evelyn. I'm coming to the debut. I have no right to be there, but I'm coming anyway. The second to Amelia. I'm sorry doesn't cover what I owe you, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying anyway. He sealed both letters and sent them before he could change his mind. Then Adrian Blackthorne, Duke, fool, broken man, sat alone in Blackthorne Manor and waited to see if the daughter he'd abandoned would give him a chance to prove he'd finally chosen her over his pride. It was the first honest thing he'd done in 7 years, and it terrified him more than any lie ever had. Evelyn's response arrived 3 days later. Adrian opened it in his study with hands that shook worse than they had in years. The letter was brief, cold, exactly what he deserved. You may attend the debut, but understand this clearly, Adrian. You are coming as a guest, not as her father. You lost that title when you chose your pride over her heart. If you want it back, you will have to earn it, and I promise you, it will cost everything you have left. There was no signature, no warmth, just those brutal sentences delivered like a judge's sentence. Adrian read it twice and felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed shut for years. Not relief, not forgiveness, just the smallest sliver of possibility that maybe he hadn't destroyed everything beyond repair. He wrote back immediately, I understand. I'll be there. Then he called for Jeffrey. The old steward appeared within minutes, moving with the careful dignity of a man who had watched his master self-destruct for 7 years and never stopped showing up anyway. Your Grace, I need you to do something for me, Jeffrey. Something important. The old man waited, patient, the way he'd always been. I need you to tell me the truth about everything, about what people have been saying, about what you've seen, about who I've become. Jeffrey was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down without being asked, something he had never done in 40 years of service. May I speak freely, Your Grace? That's what I'm asking for. The steward folded his hands in his lap and looked Adrian directly in the eyes. You've become a ghost, Your Grace, a man haunting his own life. For 7 years I've watched you trade everything real for something fake, because admitting the truth meant accepting humiliation. And in the process, you forgot the most important lesson your father ever taught you. Which was? That a man's worth isn't measured by whether he falls. It's measured by whether he has the courage to stand back up and face what he's done. Adrian felt his throat tighten. I don't know if I have that courage, Jeffrey. The old man smiled, sad but not unkind. You threw Clara out, didn't you? Sent her and the boy away after 7 years of protecting the lie? Yes. Then you have more courage than you think, Your Grace. The question is whether you have enough to finish what you started. What do you mean? Jeffrey leaned forward. Going to Lady Amelia's debut isn't enough. Standing in the back of the room like a stranger won't undo 4 years of abandonment. If you want your daughter back, Your Grace, you're going to have to do something you've never done in your entire life. What's that? Humble yourself publicly. Admit what you did, not just to Amelia, not just to Lady Evelyn, to everyone. Every lord and lady who watched you parade your bastard around while ignoring your legitimate heir, every servant who saw you choose pride over love, everyone. Adrian felt ice flood his veins. You're asking me to destroy myself. No, Your Grace. I'm asking you to rebuild yourself. There's a difference. Jeffrey stood and moved toward the door. Then he stopped and looked back. Your father used to say that power without accountability is tyranny, and tyranny always eats itself. You've been a tyrant to your own family for 7 years, Your Grace. The only question is whether you're ready to stop. He left. Adrian sat alone in the study and realized the old man was right. Showing up to Amelia's debut meant nothing if he showed up as the same man who had abandoned her, the same duke who valued reputation over truth, the same coward who would rather live a lie than face a hard reality. If he wanted his daughter back, he would have to become someone worth coming back to. And that meant doing the one thing his pride had protected him from for 7 years. He would have to confess, publicly, completely, without protection or excuse. Adrian stood and walked to his desk, pulled out fresh paper, and began writing the hardest words of his life. To the lords and ladies of England. The debut was held at the Pembroke Estate, a massive hall glittering with chandeliers and crawling with aristocrats who smelled blood in the water. Adrian arrived alone. No carriage bearing the Blackthorn crest. No servants announcing his entrance. Just a middle-aged man in formal wear walking through doors that used to open automatically at his approach. The whispers started immediately. Is that Duke Blackthorn? I heard he threw out his mistress. Finally came to his senses, did he? 4 years too late, if you ask me. Adrian kept walking, head up, eyes forward, like a man walking to the gallows who had made peace with the rope. He found Evelyn near the center of the room, surrounded by admirers complimenting her on how well she'd raised Amelia alone. She saw him approach, and every conversation within 10 feet died. Adrian, Evelyn. Her eyes were ice, assessing, looking for any sign he was here to perform instead of participate. You came. I said I would. Saying and doing have been very different things for you, Adrian. The cut landed deep. Adrian absorbed it without flinching. I know. I'm here to change that. Evelyn studied him for another long moment. Then she gestured to someone behind him. Then you should meet your daughter. Adrian turned and forgot how to breathe. Amelia stood 5 feet away in a white gown that made her look impossibly grown. 14 years old, nearly a woman, with Evelyn's eyes and her own particular gravity that had nothing to do with either parent. She looked at Adrian with the careful neutrality of someone examining a stranger. Father. The word was polite, distant, like she was greeting a distant relative she barely remembered. Adrian's throat closed, because this was it. This was the moment he had sacrificed everything to avoid facing. His daughter, his actual blood, looking at him like he was nobody. "Amelia," he managed. "You look beautiful. Thank you." Silence. Thick and suffocating. Adrian searched for something to say. Some way to bridge the canyon his choices had carved between them. But what do you say to a child you abandoned? How do you explain that you traded her for a lie because admitting the truth was too expensive? You can't. There are no words big enough. So Adrian did the only thing he could think of. He knelt, right there in the middle of the Pembroke estate with half of English aristocracy watching. Duke Adrian Blackthorne, master of 3 counties, lord of Blackthorne Manor, dropped to one knee in front of his 14-year-old daughter and bowed his head. The room went silent. Amelia stared down at him with wide eyes, shocked, confused. "Father, what are you—" "I'm sorry." Adrian's voice cracked, but he forced the words out anyway. "I'm sorry for every day I wasn't there, for every birthday I missed, for every time you needed a father and I chose something else, for making you feel like you weren't enough. You were always enough, Amelia. I was the one who wasn't." Tears were running down his face now. He didn't care. Let them see. Let everyone see what a man looked like when he finally stopped pretending. "I can't undo what I did. Can't give you back the years I stole. But I'm here now, and I'm asking, begging, for a chance to be your father again. Not because I deserve it, but because you deserve to have a father who sees you." Amelia was crying too, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "Why now? Why not 4 years ago?" "Because 4 years ago I was still too proud to admit I was wrong. Too weak to face what I'd done. But I'm not asking for forgiveness, Amelia. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." The silence stretched. Adrian stayed kneeling, stayed exposed, every eye in the room burning into his back. Then Amelia's hand touched his shoulder. "Stand up, Father." Adrian looked up and saw something in her eyes he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. He stood. Amelia studied his face with the kind of perception children develop when they've been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect them. "Mother told me you threw Clara out." "I did." "Why?" "Because keeping her meant losing you. And I finally realized which one mattered more." Amelia glanced at Evelyn. Some silent communication passed between them. Then she looked back at Adrian. "I don't trust you yet. I know, and I'm not going to make this easy. I don't want easy. I want real." Something shifted in Amelia's expression. Not warmth exactly, but a crack in the armor. "Then prove it. Not with words. With time." Adrian nodded. "However long it takes." Amelia stepped back, released him to the judgment of the room still watching their reunion like spectators at an execution. But before she turned away completely, she said one more thing. "I used to dream you'd come back, you know. Used to imagine you'd realize you made a mistake and everything would go back to normal. But I'm not that little girl anymore, Father. So if you want a relationship with who I actually am, you're going to have to let go of who you wanted me to be." The words hit Adrian like a hammer. Because she was right. He had mourned losing his 6-year-old daughter but never bothered to know the 14-year-old woman she'd become. "That changes now," he said quietly, "if you'll let it." Amelia nodded once. Then she walked away to join her mother and the knot of young people waiting to meet the new debutante. Adrian stood alone in the center of the room, feeling like he'd just survived something that should have killed him. Lord Pemberton approached first, the man whose wife had first questioned Oliver's age 4 years ago. "That was quite a display, Blackthorne." Adrian met his eyes without flinching. "It was the truth, Pemberton. Something I should have spoken years ago." The older lord studied him, then nodded. "Takes a strong man to admit weakness publicly, especially in front of this crowd. Or a desperate one." Pemberton smiled. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Other lords approached, some offering cautious support, others probing for weakness. Adrian answered every question honestly, admitted the affair, admitted the con, admitted he had been played and had destroyed his family defending the lie. Each confession felt like skinning himself alive. But with each admission, something strange happened. The shame that had controlled him for 7 years started to lose its grip. Because once the truth was spoken out loud, it stopped being the monster under the bed and became just what it was. A mistake. A massive, catastrophic mistake. But a mistake nonetheless. And mistakes could be learned from. could be corrected, could be survived if a man was brave enough to face them. By the end of the evening, Adrian had told his story to at least 20 different lords and ladies. Some listened with sympathy, others with barely concealed satisfaction. He didn't care. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about proving to Amelia that he meant what he said. Near midnight, Evelyn found him on the terrace overlooking the gardens. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him in the cold, watching the last carriages depart. Finally, that was brave. What you did in there? It was necessary. Brave and necessary aren't mutually exclusive. Adrian glanced at her. Evelyn's profile was sharp against the moonlight. Still beautiful, still distant. I don't expect forgiveness, Evelyn. From you or from Amelia. I just want a chance to be better than I was. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, I stopped hating you about a year ago, Adrian. Realized it was taking too much energy. But I haven't forgiven you either. I don't know if I ever will. I understand. Good. Because I need you to understand something else too. What's that? Evelyn turned to face him fully. Amelia is strong. Stronger than either of us. She survived your abandonment and came out the other side determined not to need anyone the way she needed you. So if you're doing this to feel better about yourself, stop now. But if you're doing this because you actually want to know your daughter, then you need to be patient and you need to be consistent, because the moment you disappoint her again will be the last moment she ever gives you. The warning was clear, final. Adrian nodded. I won't disappoint her again. Evelyn's smile was sad. Everyone disappoints everyone eventually, Adrian. The question is whether you're strong enough to stay anyway when the initial romance of redemption wears off. She left him alone on the terrace. Adrian stood in the cold and felt the weight of everything he still had to prove. The ride back to Blackthorn Manor took hours. Adrian spent them thinking about the look in Amelia's eyes. The cautious hope mixed with self-protection. The willingness to give him a chance tempered by the knowledge that he'd already wasted his first one. She was right not to trust him yet. Trust was earned through consistency, through showing up, through choosing her over his comfort every single day until the pattern proved itself real. Adrian could do that, would do that. But as the carriage pulled up to the empty manor, no Clara, no Oliver, no pretend family to greet him, Adrian realized how alone he actually was. For 7 years, he'd filled the silence with lies. Now he just had himself in the work of rebuilding what he'd destroyed. Jeffrey met him at the door. How did it go, Your Grace? Adrian thought about Amelia's hand on his shoulder, about Evelyn's warning, about the weight of 20 confessions to aristocrats who would never fully respect him again. It went exactly as hard as it needed to, Jeffrey. The old steward smiled. Then it went well, Your Grace. Adrian walked inside and stood in the entrance hall of Blackthorn Manor, this massive estate that had once represented everything he thought power meant, and realized how empty power was when you had no one to share it with. He climbed the stairs to the nursery he'd closed 4 years ago, opened the door, found Amelia's old things still packed away in boxes the servants had never been told to discard. Adrian knelt and opened the first box. Inside were dolls, books, drawings in a child's hand, evidence of a little girl who had loved her father before he taught her not to. Adrian pulled out a drawing of a family, stick figures holding hands. Mother, father, and a small girl in the middle labeled Amelia in careful letters. He sat on the floor of that empty nursery holding his daughter's childhood and wept like he hadn't wept since the day his own father died. Because this was grief, real grief, not for something taken from him, but for something he'd thrown away with his own hands. And grief was the price of finally seeing clearly. Adrian stayed in that nursery until dawn, surrounded by the remnants of a relationship he had destroyed and was now desperately trying to rebuild from ash and broken promises. When the sun came up, he stood, put the drawing in his pocket, and made himself a promise that no one else would ever hear, but that he would keep anyway. Every day for the rest of his life, he would choose Amelia, choose truth, choose the hard, humiliating work of being better than he was, not because it would fix what he'd broken, but because it was the only thing left worth doing. Adrian walked downstairs and found Jeffrey preparing breakfast in the empty dining room. Your Grace, will you be eating alone this morning? Adrian looked at the long table where he'd once seated Clara and Oliver, where he'd performed the fiction of a happy family while his real family died of neglect. No, Jeffrey. Set one place and join me. The old steward's eyebrows rose. Your Grace, it's not proper. I know. Do it anyway. Geoffrey hesitated. Then he set two places and sat down across from Adrian for the first time in 40 years of service. They ate in silence for a while. Then Adrian said, Tell me about Amelia, about what I missed. Everything. Geoffrey's eyes went soft. She learned to ride when she was 10, took to it naturally. Lady Evelyn said, She has your seat. What else? She reads voraciously. Philosophy, history, poetry. She's sharper than most adults I've met. Good. What else? Geoffrey smiled. She asks questions that make her tutors uncomfortable. Wants to know why things are the way they are instead of just accepting them. She's going to be formidable, Your Grace. Adrian felt pride and grief war in his chest. She already is. They finished breakfast, then Adrian stood and walked to his study where letters were already waiting. Invitations he would accept or decline based on whether they brought him closer to or further from his daughter. Business matters he would handle with efficiency instead of using as excuses to hide. And one letter, still sealed, from Evelyn's solicitor outlining a formal proposal. Adrian opened it. Inside was an offer he never expected. Lady Evelyn was proposing a trial reconciliation. Not marriage, not a full reunion, but a structured arrangement where Adrian could visit Amelia twice a week under supervision, where he could prove through consistent action that he meant what he said. The terms were strict, non-negotiable, designed to protect Amelia from further disappointment. Adrian read them 3 times and felt something close to hope. This was his chance, his only chance. He wrote back immediately, I accept every term. When do we start? The response came 2 days later. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Don't be late. Adrian showed up at 1:45. Evelyn answered the door of her London townhouse with an expression that gave nothing away. You're early. I didn't want to risk being late. Smart. She led him inside to a sitting room where Amelia waited. His daughter looked up when he entered, and Adrian saw the same cautious hope from the debut. Father. Amelia. Evelyn sat down between them like a referee. Here are the rules. You visit twice a week. Tuesday and Saturday afternoons, 2 hours each visit. You don't make promises you can't keep. You don't try to buy her affection. And the moment you miss a visit without a damn good reason is the moment this arrangement ends. Understood? Understood. Amelia shifted in her seat. And if I don't want to see you on a particular day, I don't have to. Adrian nodded. Your comfort comes first, always. She studied him, testing to see if he meant it. What if I'm angry with you? Then you're angry with me. I'll sit with it. What if I say things that hurt? Then they hurt. I'll listen anyway. Amelia glanced at her mother. Evelyn nodded slightly. Okay, we can try this. Adrian felt his chest loosen. Thank you. The first visit was awkward, stilted, full of silence neither of them knew how to fill. But Adrian showed up. The second visit was slightly easier. Adrian showed up again. By the 5th visit, Amelia started asking questions. Why did you choose her over us? Adrian took a breath. Told the truth. Because I was lonely, and she made me feel seen. And instead of fixing what was broken with your mother, I ran to something easier. It was selfish, and it was wrong. Did you ever love us? Every day. But I loved my pride more, and that's something I'll regret until I die. Amelia absorbed this. Then, do you love us now? More than anything. But love without action is just words. So I'm here to show you, not tell you. She nodded, filed it away in whatever mental ledger she was keeping. The visits continued. Weeks became months. Adrian never missed one. Not when he was sick. Not when business demanded his attention. Not when it would have been easier to send an excuse. He showed up. And slowly, painfully slowly, Amelia started to trust that he would keep showing up. 6 months in, she laughed at something he said. Actually laughed. Adrian felt like he'd been given air after drowning. 8 months in, she asked if he wanted to see her ride. Adrian stood in the cold watching his daughter command a horse like she'd been born to it and felt pride so fierce it burned. 10 months in, Amelia fell off during a jump and Adrian was the first person she looked for. He ran to her, helped her up, checked for injuries. And when she cried, not from pain but from frustration, He just held her and let her cry until she was ready to try again. That night, riding home, Adrian realized something had shifted. He wasn't earning his daughter back to fill the hole in himself anymore. He was showing up because she deserved a father. Whether she forgave him or not, whether she ever fully trusted him or not, she deserved someone who chose her. And for the first time in his life, Adrian was learning what it meant to love someone more than he loved his own comfort. A year after the debut, Evelyn called Adrian to the townhouse for a private conversation. He arrived expecting bad news, found her in the library with tea already poured. "Sit down, Adrian." He sat, waited. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then, "Amelia wants to spend a weekend at Blackthorn Manor, unsupervised." Adrian's heart stopped. "She does?" "She does. And before you get excited, understand that this isn't forgiveness. This is her testing whether you've actually changed or if you've just been performing for my benefit. I understand. Do you? Because if you revert the moment she's on your territory, if the old Adrian comes back the second you're not under supervision, she'll see it immediately. And this will end." Adrian met Evelyn's eyes. "I won't revert. This isn't performance, Evelyn. This is who I am now." She searched his face, looking for cracks, for signs of the man who had destroyed their family. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Next weekend, Friday through Sunday. I'll be one telegram away if she needs me. She won't need you, but send the telegram anyway." Evelyn almost smiled. "Don't make me regret this, Adrian. I won't." That Friday, Amelia arrived at Blackthorn Manor in a carriage driven by guards who looked ready to burn the estate down if anything went wrong. Adrian met her at the door. "Welcome home," he said quietly. Amelia looked up at the massive facade of the manor, her birthright, and Adrian saw 100 emotions cross her face. "It's bigger than I remember. You were 6 the last time you were here." She nodded, then walked inside like she was entering enemy territory. Adrian had prepared everything, her old nursery restored, fresh flowers in every room, her favorite foods waiting in the kitchen. But he didn't mention any of it, just showed her to her room and told her dinner was at 7 if she wanted it, giving her control, letting her set the pace. That first night they ate in near silence. The second day, Amelia asked for a tour of the estate. Adrian showed her everything, the stables, the gardens, the library where he'd once held her as a baby and promised she'd be smarter than all of them. When they reached the nursery, Amelia stopped. "This was mine?" Adrian pulled the drawing from his pocket, the one he'd carried for a year. The stick figure family holding hands. "You drew this when you were 5. Amelia took it with shaking hands, stared at the careful letters spelling her name. "I don't remember drawing this." "I do. You gave it to me on my birthday, told me we'd be together forever." The past tense hit them both. Amelia set the drawing down carefully. "Do you still have all my things?" "Every single one." She walked through the boxes of dolls and books and childhood memories, touching them like artifacts from someone else's life. Then she turned to Adrian with tears running down her face. "Why? Why keep all this if you were just going to leave me?" Adrian felt his own tears start. "Because I never stopped loving you, Amelia. I just stopped being brave enough to show it. And every day you were gone, I kept these things because they were all I had left of the daughter I threw away." Amelia collapsed into his arms and cried the way children cry when they finally feel safe enough to break. Adrian held her and let her soak his shirt and promised himself he would never, never give her reason to cry like this again. That night they sat by the fire and Amelia asked the question Adrian had been dreading. "What happened to Oliver?" Adrian took a breath. "I gave Clara enough money to settle somewhere comfortable. Last I heard, they're in Cornwall. Thomas is with them." She looked at him sharply. "His real father?" "Yes." "Does Oliver know?" "I don't know. That's Clara's choice to make." Amelia was quiet for a long time. Then, "Do you ever regret sending him away?" Adrian met her eyes. "I regret that a 7-year-old boy got caught in the middle of adult lies, but I don't regret choosing you over him." "You're my daughter, Amelia. You always were. I just forgot for a while." She nodded slowly. "He didn't do anything wrong, you know." "Oliver. He was just a kid." "I know. So maybe someday you could make sure he's okay. Not bring him back. Just make sure he's okay." Adrian felt his throat close, because this compassion for a child who had been his rival was proof that Amelia was better than he'd ever been. "I'll make sure he's okay." Amelia smiled. Small, but genuine. "Good." They sat in silence until the fire burned low. Then Amelia said, "I think I'm ready to forgive you, Father. Not for what you did, but for who you're becoming." Adrian looked at his daughter, 14 years old and wiser than most adults, and felt something fundamental shift in his chest. This was it. This was what real power felt like. Not controlling people, not forcing outcomes, but earning trust, building bridges, choosing love over pride even when pride was easier. "Thank you," he whispered. Amelia leaned against his shoulder. "Don't waste it. I won't." And in that moment, sitting in Blackthorn Manor with his daughter, finally home, Adrian understood what Jeffrey had tried to tell him a year ago. Rebuilding wasn't about erasing the past. It was about proving the future could be different. And for the first time in 8 years, Adrian Blackthorn believed it actually could be. But as he sat there with Amelia falling asleep against his shoulder and the fire crackling low, he had no idea that the hardest test was still coming. Because Clara had just sent a letter that would arrive tomorrow morning. And inside it was a threat that would force Adrian to choose one final time between protecting his pride and protecting his daughter. The letter arrived with the Morning Post. Jeffrey brought it to Adrian's study where he sat reviewing estate finances with Amelia, curled in the window seat reading philosophy. She had stayed the entire weekend, and neither of them had mentioned her leaving. Evelyn's telegram sat unanswered on his desk, a silent agreement that something had shifted and nobody wanted to name it yet. "Your Grace, this just arrived," marked urgent. Adrian took the envelope and felt ice crawl down his spine when he recognized Clara's handwriting. He looked at Amelia. She had glanced up at Jeffrey's tone, book forgotten in her lap. "Everything all right, Father?" The word father still landed like a gift every time she used it. Adrian forced himself to nod. Just estate business, nothing to worry about. But his hands were shaking as he broke the seal. Inside was a single page. No greeting, no pretense of civility. Just Clara's rage distilled into sentences sharp enough to draw blood. "You think you've won, Adrian? You think throwing us out and playing the repentant father erases what you owe? Oliver is 8 years old now, old enough to ask questions about why his father abandoned him. Old enough to wonder why he's not living in the manner that should be his birthright. I've kept him quiet so far. But my silence has a price. £50,000, deposited within the week. Or I start telling people the real story, how Duke Adrian Blackthorn knew Oliver wasn't his son for years and kept quiet to avoid humiliation. How you rewrote inheritance documents knowing you were defrauding your own estate. How you're not the noble reformed duke but a coward who only changed when the lie became too expensive to maintain. Your choice. Save your reputation or watch me burn it down." Adrian read it 3 times while his heart hammered against his ribs. Because Clara was right. Everything she threatened to expose was true. He had known Oliver wasn't his son and continued the charade anyway, had rewritten legal documents based on a lie, had chosen pride over truth for years. If she went public with the full timeline, with proof that Adrian had known and stayed silent, it would destroy everything he'd rebuilt. The carefully earned respect from peers who had watched him humble himself, the fragile trust Amelia had started to extend, the possibility of someday reconciling with Evelyn beyond supervised visits. All of it would collapse under the weight of one final revelation, that Adrian's redemption was built on an incomplete confession. He looked up and found Amelia watching him with those 2 sharp eyes that missed nothing. "That's not estate business, is it?" Adrian felt the familiar weight of a choice settling onto his shoulders. He could lie, could hide this letter and handle Clara quietly, pay her off and buy her silence, protect the version of himself he'd spent a year becoming. Or he could do the thing he'd promised himself he would always do from now on, choose truth over comfort. Adrian folded the letter and met his daughter's eyes. "No, it's not estate business. It's a threat from Clara." Amelia sat up straighter. Jeffrey went very still by the door. "What kind of threat?" Adrian took a breath and made the choice. "She wants £50,000 or she'll expose something I never told anyone. Something that makes my redemption look like a performance instead of real change." Amelia's face went carefully neutral, the same expression Evelyn used when she was bracing for impact. What didn't you tell anyone? That I knew Oliver wasn't mine for over a year before I sent Clara away. That I found letters proving the con, and instead of confronting it immediately, I buried the truth because admitting I'd been played was too humiliating. The silence was suffocating. Adrian watched his daughter process this new betrayal, watched her recalculate everything about the past year, every apology, every visit, every moment he'd claimed to choose truth. How long? Amelia's voice was quiet, deadly quiet. How long did you know before you finally did something? 14 months. He watched the number hit her like a physical blow. 14 months. You knew you'd destroyed our family for a lie and you just kept living it? Yes. Amelia stood, walked to the window, stared out at the grounds with her back to Adrian. When he could stand the silence no longer, he said, I'm sorry, Amelia. I know sorry doesn't cover it. I know. Why are you telling me this now? She turned to face him, and Adrian saw tears tracking down her face. If you've kept this secret for over a year, why tell me now? Why not just pay her and keep hiding it? Adrian stood, moved toward her but stopped when she stepped back. Because hiding it means I haven't actually changed. Means I'm still choosing comfort over truth. And I promised myself, that I would never do that again. Even if telling me destroys everything we've built this year, especially then. Because if what we've built can't survive the full truth, then it isn't real. And I'm done living inside lies, Amelia, even the comfortable ones. She studied him with eyes too old for 14, eyes that had learned to look for cracks in foundation because the people she trusted kept crumbling. You're going to lose everything again, she said quietly. When this comes out, when people know you kept quiet that long, they'll destroy you. Probably. And you're telling me anyway? Yes. Why? Because you deserve a father who tells you the truth even when it costs him everything. And because I'd rather lose everything honestly than keep anything through lies. Amelia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That gesture, so young, so vulnerable, made Adrian's chest ache. What are you going to do? She asked. Tell the truth. Publicly. Before Clara can weaponize it. Admit the full timeline to everyone. And accept whatever consequences come. That's insane, Father. You'll be ruined. I've been ruined before. I survived it. And I came out the other side better than I was. Maybe that's the lesson I keep having to learn. That rock bottom keeps having a basement until you stop being afraid of the fall. Amelia was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mother needs to know, before you do anything public. I know, and I need time to process this. Adrian nodded. Take all the time you need. She walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. I don't know if I can forgive this one, Father. The words cut deep, but Adrian absorbed them without flinching. I understand, and I'll still tell the truth anyway, because it's the right thing to do, whether you forgive me or not. Amelia left without looking back. Adrian stood alone in the study with Clara's letter in one hand and the ruins of everything he'd rebuilt in the other. Geoffrey cleared his throat. Shall I prepare a statement, Your Grace? Adrian looked at the old steward who had watched him destroy himself twice and still showed up every morning. Yes. And send for my solicitor. If I'm going to confess, I'm going to do it properly. That evening, Adrian rode to Evelyn's townhouse unannounced. She answered the door herself, clearly not expecting him on a Sunday, and her expression shifted from surprise to alarm when she saw his face. What happened? Can I come in? Evelyn stepped aside, led him to the same library where she'd agreed to let Amelia visit the manor. It felt like a lifetime ago. Adrian handed her Clara's letter without preamble. Evelyn read it. Her face went pale, then red, then very, very calm in the way that meant she was furious beyond expression. When she finally looked up, her voice could have cut glass. You knew. For over a year. You knew and you kept quiet. Yes. While I was letting you back into our daughter's life, while you were performing redemption, while I was starting to believe you'd actually changed. I have changed, Evelyn, but I changed incompletely. I told the truth about the affair and the con, but I didn't tell the truth about knowing, and that omission makes everything else a lie. Evelyn stood, paced. Adrian could see her calculating, assessing, deciding whether to throw him out or hear him through. Finally, what are you going to do? Tell everyone. The full timeline, before Clara can use it as leverage. You'll be destroyed. I know. Evelyn stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Then why? Because Amelia deserves a father who chooses truth over preservation, and because I'm tired of being afraid of consequences. I'd rather face them honestly than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder waiting for the next threat. Evelyn sat down slowly, studied him with an intensity that made Adrian feel transparent. You're serious? Completely. This will undo everything, every bridge you've rebuilt, every relationship you've repaired. People will say your redemption was fake, that you can't be trusted. They'll be partially right. My redemption was incomplete, but it wasn't fake. The work I've done this year, showing up for Amelia, learning to choose truth, becoming someone worth trusting, that was real. The foundation was just cracked. So I'm going to expose the crack before it brings down the whole structure. Evelyn was quiet for a very long time. Adrian waited, gave her space to process. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he expected. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying to. No. You have. The old Adrian would have paid Clara off and buried this forever. Would have protected his reputation at any cost. But you're sitting here choosing destruction over deception. That's actually brave. Adrian felt his throat tighten. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Good. Evelyn's smile was small but genuine. Bravery without fear is just arrogance. You've had enough of that. She stood and walked to her desk, pulled out paper and ink. If you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. I'll help you write the statement. Make sure it's clear and complete. No room for Clara to twist your words. Adrian stared at her. You're helping me? Evelyn met his eyes. I'm helping Amelia. She deserves to see her father do the right thing even when it costs him everything. And frankly, I'm tired of Clara having power over this family. So yes, I'm helping. They worked until midnight drafting a statement that laid out everything. The affair, the con, the timeline of Adrian's knowledge, the year of silence, the decision to finally act, and the acknowledgement that his redemption had been incomplete but was now being corrected through full transparency. When they finished, Evelyn read it through one final time. This will ruin you, Adrian. You understand that? Yes. You'll lose respect. Invitations. Possibly even your seat in Parliament. I know. And you're still going through with it? Adrian thought about Amelia's face when she'd learned the truth. About the way she'd said, I don't know if I can forgive this one. Yes. Because keeping Amelia's respect matters more than keeping society's, and I can't earn her respect through lies. Evelyn folded the statement carefully. Then send it tomorrow. To every major paper in London. Let them print it in full. No selective editing, no damage control, just the raw truth. Adrian nodded. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Evelyn said something that surprised him. I'm proud of you. For what it's worth. This version of you, the one willing to lose everything for truth, is someone I could have built a life with. The past tense hung in the air like smoke. But it's too late for us, isn't it? Adrian said quietly. Evelyn's smile was sad. I think so. Too much damage, too many years. But that doesn't mean I can't respect what you're becoming, or hope you succeed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until after the papers print your confession and society tears you apart. Then we'll see if you're still grateful. The statement ran in every major London paper the next morning. By noon, Adrian's study was flooded with responses. Some supportive, most savage. A few that called for him to resign from every position he held. Lord Pemberton sent a note that simply said, You're either the bravest fool I've ever met or the most foolish brave man. Time will tell which. Adrian read them all, absorbed the judgment, accepted it, because this was the price of incomplete truth, and he was paying it in full. Amelia didn't contact him for 3 days. Adrian respected the silence. Didn't push, just waited. On the 4th day, she appeared at Blackthorn Manor unannounced. Geoffrey showed her to the study where Adrian was reviewing the latest round of scathing editorials about his moral failings. She stood in the doorway, looking exhausted. Father. Amelia. She walked in and sat down across from him. I read your statement, in all 7 papers. And? And I'm still angry with you. Adrian nodded. You have every right to be. But I'm also... She struggled for words. I'm also impressed. That you did it, that you chose truth even though you knew what it would cost. I learned from the best, Adrian said quietly. You told me at the debut that you weren't the little girl who needed me anymore. That if I wanted a relationship with who you actually are, I had to let go of who I wanted you to be. So I'm doing the same thing, letting go of who I wanted to be, accepting who I actually am. Flaws and failures and all. Amelia's eyes were wet. You're going to lose everything, Father. Society is destroying you. I know. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. But staying silent scared me more. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Mother said you could have paid Clara off. Made this all go away. I could have. Why didn't you? Because I'm not raising you to believe that money can bury truth, or that avoiding consequences is the same as being honorable. I want you to see that sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything, and that losing everything doesn't mean you failed. It just means you chose something more important than winning. Amelia wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Father, for keeping quiet that year, for building my trust on incomplete truth. I understand, but I can respect what you're doing now, and maybe that's enough to keep trying. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. That's more than enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then Amelia said, What happens now, after society finishes destroying you? Adrian looked around the study, at the estate that had been his prison and his kingdom, at the legacy that was crumbling under the weight of truth. Now I rebuild again. Smaller this time, more honest. I focus on being your father instead of being a duke, and I stop caring whether society forgives me as long as you eventually might. Amelia stood, walked to the window overlooking the grounds. I think I'd like to come visit more often. Not supervised, just regular visits, like normal families have. Adrian felt tears burn his eyes. I'd like that very much. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. She turned to face him. No more secrets. No more incomplete truths. If you know something that affects me or Mother or our family, you tell us. Immediately. Even if it's ugly. Even if it costs you. No more protecting us from reality. Adrian stood and crossed the room, knelt in front of his daughter the way he had at her debut. I promise. No more secrets, no more protection from truth. You have my word. Amelia put her hand on his shoulder. Then stand up, Father, and let's figure out how to survive this together. Adrian stood, pulled his daughter into a hug that she returned fiercely, and for the first time since Clara's letter arrived, Adrian felt something like hope. The social destruction was total. Within 2 weeks, Adrian had been asked to resign from 3 charitable boards, disinvited from a dozen upcoming events, removed from the guest lists of families who had welcomed him back after his first public confession. The editorials were savage. One particularly brutal piece called him the Duke of Deception, a man who had weaponized redemption as performance art while hiding the depths of his cowardice. Adrian read every word, accepted every criticism, responded to none of it, because defending himself meant arguing with truth, and he was done doing that. Instead, he focused on what mattered. He visited Amelia 3 times a week. They rode horses and discussed philosophy and slowly built the relationship they should have had all along. He met with Evelyn monthly to discuss Amelia's education and future. The meetings were formal, cordial, but there was a baseline of respect that hadn't existed before. He restructured his estate finances to prioritize Amelia's security over his own comfort, and he stopped attending society functions entirely. Stopped performing for people whose approval meant nothing compared to his daughter's trust. 6 months after the confession, Jeffrey found Adrian in the library reading. Your Grace, you have a visitor. I'm not receiving anyone, Jeffrey. You know that. I think you'll want to receive this one, Your Grace. Adrian looked up. Jeffrey's expression was unreadable. Who is it? Young Master Oliver, Your Grace. And Miss Clara. Adrian's blood went cold. What are they doing here? Jeffrey's voice was carefully neutral. The boy asked to see you, Your Grace. Said he had questions only you could answer. Adrian stood slowly. Where are they? The front sitting room. I've stationed 2 footmen nearby, just in case. Adrian nodded, walked through the manor on legs that felt unsteady. He found them waiting exactly where Jeffrey said. Clara looked older, harder. Oliver sat beside her looking nervous and defiant in equal measure. The boy was 9 now, old enough to have Thomas's features clearly visible in his face, old enough to understand more than adults gave him credit for. Adrian walked in and closed the door behind him. Clara. Adrian! The formality was thick enough to choke on. Why are you here? Clara's jaw tightened. Oliver wanted to meet you. He's been reading about you in the papers, about how you confessed everything. He had questions. Adrian looked at the boy, at Thomas Garrett's son who he'd raised as his own for 7 years. What questions? Oliver stood. His voice was shaky but determined. Are you my real father? The directness of it punched the air from Adrian's lungs. He looked at Clara. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Permission to tell the truth. Adrian knelt so he was eye level with Oliver. No, I'm not your biological father. A man named Thomas Garrett is. Oliver's face crumpled, but he didn't cry. Did you know? When you were raising me? For most of it, yes. Then why did you keep pretending? Adrian felt the weight of that question settle onto his shoulders. Because I was a coward, Oliver. I'd already destroyed my real family defending the lie. Admitting the truth meant accepting I'd failed, so I kept pretending because it was easier than facing what I'd done. That's a terrible reason. You're absolutely right. It is. Oliver was quiet for a moment, processing. Do you hate me for not being yours? Adrian felt his chest crack open. No, Oliver, I don't hate you. You didn't choose any of this. You were just a child caught in adult lies, and I'm sorry for that, for all of it. The boy nodded slowly. Then, Miss Amelia is your real daughter, right? Yes. Do you love her more than you loved me? Adrian took a breath. I love her differently, because she's actually mine. But that doesn't mean the time I spent with you was fake, Oliver. I was wrong about a lot of things, but caring about you, trying to be a father even when I knew you weren't mine, that part was real. Oliver wiped his eyes. Mother says you told the truth about everything, even the parts that made you look bad. I did. Why? Because I was tired of living inside lies, and because the people I love deserved better than secrets. Does that include me? Adrian met the boy's eyes. Yes, Oliver, that includes you. You deserved a father who told you the truth from the beginning. I failed you in that, and I'm sorry. Clara stood abruptly. That's enough. Oliver, say goodbye. But the boy didn't move. Can I come visit sometimes? He asked Adrian. Not as your son, just as someone you used to know? Adrian glanced at Clara. She looked torn, angry, but underneath it, exhausted. If your mother allows it, yes, you're welcome here. Clara's laugh was bitter. You're unbelievable, even now, even after everything. I mean it, Clara. Oliver didn't choose this, neither did Amelia. They're both children who got hurt by adult choices. If they want a relationship, I won't stand in the way. Clara studied him like she was looking for the trap. You're not doing this to hurt me? I'm doing this because it's right. What you and I did to each other is between us. But Oliver deserves the chance to know the man who raised him, even if I wasn't his father. She was quiet for a long time, then, once a month, supervised. And if you try to turn him against me, I won't. I promise. Clara nodded curtly, gathered Oliver. At the door, the boy turned back. Thank you for telling me the truth. Adrian felt his throat close. You're welcome, Oliver. They left. Adrian stood in the empty sitting room and felt like he'd just survived something that should have killed him. That evening, he told Amelia about Oliver's visit. She listened carefully. Then, are you going to let him come back? If Clara allows it, yes, he deserves answers, deserves to understand his own story. Amelia studied him. You're different, Father, than you were even 6 months ago. How so? 6 months ago, you would have slammed the door in their faces, told Oliver it wasn't your problem. But you didn't. You took responsibility for your part in his pain. Adrian nodded slowly. I'm learning that being a man isn't about protecting yourself from consequences. It's about accepting them and trying to minimize the damage to innocent people caught in your mistakes. Amelia smiled. I think I'm proud of you, Father. The words hit Adrian like a benediction. That means more to me than you know. They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind of silence families build after surviving disasters together. A year after the confession, Evelyn invited Adrian to dinner. Not a formal meeting, not a discussion about Amelia, just dinner. Adrian arrived uncertain what to expect. Found Evelyn in her dining room with Amelia already seated. This is a surprise. Sit down, Adrian. He sat. A meal appeared. They ate mostly in silence until Evelyn finally spoke. I've been thinking about something you said, about rebuilding smaller and more honest. And I think I'm ready to try something. Try what? Not reconciliation, not a reunion, but maybe a friendship. The three of us. A family that doesn't look like other families, but works anyway. Adrian looked at Amelia. She nodded. We talked about it, Father, and we think you've earned a chance. Not to be my husband again, Evelyn continued, but to be someone I can trust, someone Amelia can depend on, someone who exists in our lives without trying to control them. Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Amelia interjected. Say you'll keep showing up, keep choosing truth, keep being the father who kneels instead of towers. Adrian looked at these two women, the wife he'd lost and the daughter he'd abandoned, who were offering him something he didn't deserve but desperately needed. Yes. I'll keep showing up, for as long as you'll let me. Evelyn raised her glass. Then here's to small beginnings and honest endings. They drank. And for the first time in a decade, Adrian felt like he was part of something real. 2 years after the confession, Adrian stood in Blackthorn Manor watching Amelia's 16th birthday celebration. The guest list was small, mostly Amelia's friends and a few carefully selected family allies who had forgiven Adrian's deceptions. Evelyn moved through the room playing hostess like she'd never left. Oliver was there too. He came monthly now, had started calling Adrian by his first name instead of father. It was healthier, more honest. Geoffrey approached with a letter. This arrived, Your Grace. From Parliament. Adrian opened it, expecting another rejection, found instead a surprising invitation. A committee was forming to investigate corruption in inheritance law. They wanted Adrian to testify, to share his experience with fraudulent claims and the legal loopholes that enabled them. Your expertise would be invaluable, the letter read, given your unique perspective on the matter. Adrian read it twice, then showed it to Geoffrey. They want me to help close the legal gaps I exploited. The old steward smiled. Seems appropriate, Your Grace. Use your mistakes to prevent others from making them. Adrian looked around the room, at Amelia laughing with friends, at Evelyn directing servants with practiced ease, at Oliver talking quietly with young people who had no idea about his complicated history. This was what redemption actually looked like. Not erasing the past, not being forgiven by everyone, but taking the wreckage of your failures and building something useful from the debris. He wrote back that evening, accepting the invitation. 3 months later, Adrian stood before Parliament and testified about every legal mechanism he'd abused, every loophole he'd exploited, every way the system enabled men like him to commit fraud through inheritance manipulation. The testimony was brutal, humiliating. Several lords who had previously tolerated Adrian walked out in disgust. But the committee listened, took notes, and 6 months later they passed reform legislation that closed many of the gaps Adrian had identified. It didn't undo his damage, but it prevented others from repeating his mistakes. And that, Adrian was learning, was what atonement meant. Not erasing consequences, but ensuring the pain you caused served some purpose beyond destruction. On Amelia's 17th birthday, she asked Adrian to walk with her through the manor grounds. They walked in comfortable silence until she stopped by the old oak tree where she used to play as a child. I've been thinking about forgiveness, she said quietly. And I think I'm finally ready to give it. Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger. Adrian felt his chest tighten. You don't have to forgive me, Amelia. I'm grateful just to be in your life. She turned to face him. I know I don't have to. That's why I'm choosing to. Because forgiveness isn't about you anymore, Father. It's about me. About releasing the weight of what you did so I can move forward without dragging it behind me. Adrian felt tears stream down his face. Thank you. Amelia hugged him. held him while he cried, then stepped back. But understand something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll always remember what you did. Always carry the scar of being abandoned. But I'm choosing not to let it define our relationship going forward. I understand. Good. Because I need you to be present for something important. What's that? I've been accepted to Oxford to study philosophy and law. I want to follow in your footsteps, not the destructive ones, but the redemptive ones. I want to work on legal reform, help people caught in systems that abuse them. Adrian felt pride so fierce it burned. You're going to change the world, Amelia. Maybe. Or maybe I'll just change a few lives. Either way, I want you there. At my graduation, in my life, as my father. Adrian pulled her close. I'll be there. For every moment you'll let me. They walked back to the manor together, father and daughter, broken and rebuilt. Not perfect, but real. 5 years after the confession, Adrian sat in his study reading a letter from Oliver. The boy was 14 now, living with Clara and Thomas in Cornwall. The letter was brief but warm. Adrian, I wanted you to know I'm doing well. Mother finally told me everything about the con, about how they targeted you. I'm angry at her for it, but I also understand she was desperate. Desperation makes people do terrible things. I learned that from watching what it did to you. Thank you for the monthly visits, for treating me with honesty even when it cost you. You weren't my father by blood, but you taught me something about accountability that my real father never did. That matters. Oliver. Adrian folded the letter carefully and added it to the box where he kept Amelia's childhood drawings, evidence of relationships rebuilt from rubble. That evening, Evelyn joined him for their weekly dinner. They ate in the manor dining room, neutral territory that belonged to neither of them but welcomed them both. Amelia is thriving at Oxford, Evelyn said. Top of her class. She gets that from you. Evelyn smiled. She gets the intelligence from me, the stubbornness from you. Fair. They ate in companionable silence. Then Evelyn said, I never thought we'd end up here, Adrian. Friends, co-parents, people who actually like each other. Neither did I. Do you regret it? Everything that happened? Adrian thought about Clara, about Oliver, about the 7 years he'd spent living a lie and the years after spent rebuilding from truth. I regret the pain I caused, the time I wasted, the relationships I damaged, but I don't regret where it led, because this version of us, broken but honest, is better than what we had before. Evelyn raised her glass. To better late than never. Adrian clinked his glass against hers. To second chances. They drank. And in that moment, Adrian understood the final lesson his catastrophic failures had taught him. That falling wasn't the end, that mistakes didn't have to be permanent, that a man could destroy everything he built and still find purpose in the ruins if he was brave enough to face what he'd done and humble enough to learn from it. Power didn't come from control or wealth or title. It came from the courage to stand back up after you'd hit bottom, to admit failure, to accept consequences, to rebuild smaller and truer, and to show up every single day for the people who mattered, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. 10 years after the confession, Adrian Blackthorne stood in the gallery of Parliament watching his daughter deliver her first speech as a newly elected representative. Amelia spoke about legal reform, about inheritance law, about protecting vulnerable people from manipulation. Every word was fire, every argument was steel. And when she finished, the chamber erupted in applause. Adrian watched from the gallery with tears streaming down his face, and Geoffrey standing quietly beside him. Your father would be proud, Geoffrey whispered. I hope so. I'm certain of it, Your Grace. You lost everything and found something better. That's the rarest kind of strength. Adrian watched his daughter accept congratulations from fellow representatives, watched her command respect through competence instead of title, and he realized that this, watching Amelia thrive, knowing he had contributed to her foundation instead of just her damage, this was what legacy actually meant. Not wealth passed down, not titles inherited, but values lived, lessons learned from failure, character forged through accountability. Amelia looked up and found him in the gallery. Smiled. Adrian smiled back, then slipped out before the attention could shift to him, because this wasn't his moment, it was hers, And the greatest gift he could give his daughter was the space to build her own legacy without being shadowed by his mistakes. He walked out of Parliament into the London evening and realized he felt something he hadn't felt in over a decade. Peace. Not the peace of a man who had escaped consequences, but the peace of a man who had faced them completely, who had paid what he owed, who had rebuilt what he could and accepted what was lost. Adrian Blackthorne had been a duke who lost everything. And in losing everything, he had finally learned what actually mattered. Not power, not wealth, not reputation, but truth, accountability, love without condition. And the bone-deep knowledge that a man could fall as far as hell itself and still climb back if he was willing to do the work of becoming someone worth trusting again. The work was never finished, would never be finished. But for the first time in his life, Adrian wasn't running from it anymore. He was walking toward it, one honest choice at a time.